You're listening to the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.
And now, it's time for the show that breaks down the options market. From unusual activity alerts to market analysis, strategy overviews, listener questions, and much more. If it involves puts and calls, then our all-star panel will break it down. It's time to hit the option block with your host, Mark Longo from the Options Insider Media Group, and co-hosts Uncle Mike Tussaw from RCM Asset Management, Andrew the Rock Lobster Giovinazzi from OptionPit.com, and Mark the Greasy Meatball Sebastian from OptionPit.com. And now, get ready to hit the option block.
All right, everybody, that rockin' tune means it's time once again to rock out on your favorite bi-weekly options program. It's time for the Option Block. My name is Mark Longo from the OptionsInsider.com, as well as, of course, from the ever-exciting Options Insider Radio Network. You guys know how you can get us by now because you're listening to us right now, but maybe you're listening to one of those folks who says, hey, you know, I really wish I could listen to this the second it is uttered forth into the universe. The second we don't have to wait for the podcast. You can join us every Monday and Thursday, 3 p.m. Central, 4 p.m. Eastern, via the old Mixlr, Mixlr. Grab it once, set it and forget it. You're good to go. A lot of you like to follow us in the Mixlr app. You can certainly choose to do that too. Then you get notified not just for this show, but for Vol Views and for TWIFO and for some of our live stuff. We got FIA coming to town this week, so maybe we'll be able to squeeze in some live interviews this week from the studio as well. A lot of good stuff coming. That's the easiest place to find the live, but we know the lion's share you like to listen on demand. We like you guys too. Just make sure, if you haven't done so already, make sure you upgrade to the full network feed. That way you get all the shows, not just the option block, so you can keep you busy, keep your options needs satiated 24/7. 365. However you listen, live after the fact, make sure you hit us up. Questions, comments, insights, all that good stuff. We do, yes, believe it or not, we do actually like to hear from you guys. And joining me on the program today, let's see who we got here on the old all-star panel revolving. Let's start off, I believe he is cruising about somewhere in the suburbs. He's usually in his home base of good old St. Charles. Today, he's on assignment. Let's see if we can pick him up in movement in between those destinations, where we are joined by good old Uncle Mike Tussaw from RCM Wealth Advisors. Uncle Mike, welcome back to the program, sir.
Always happy to be here on a Monday. What's more exciting than this?
Nothing is possibly more exciting than a Monday edition of the Option Block. We'll have the Meatball joining us in a little bit, the greasiest of meatballs, as you know, fashionably late, as always, listeners, but also joining us today to round out our Monday Palooza here on the old Option Block. We got the Tubbinator, a.k.a. Matt Tubby Benson, a.k.a. the Options Man About Town. So if you come around Chicago, chances are you might see him because he's always about the town. Matt, welcome back to the show, sir.
Thank you, Mark. We're good to be back. I may have to change my acronym to a.k.a. You like that one better than Tub?
AKA. AKA is all right, but Tub will always be your name, sir, regardless. If you became a dentist in your next phase of life or a pharmacist, I would still call you Tub. So I think the die is cast in that sense, sir. All right, like we said, we'll have Meatball joining us in a little bit, but let's not wait for him. Let's keep on rolling right on into the trading block.
It's time to break down the latest topics, trades, and trends in the world of options. It's time for the Trading Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Trading Block. Like the man said, this is the portion of the show where we break down what was trading today. Yeah, not an overall super spectacular day in terms of net moves. Most of the major indices ending up, at least on the day, settling off fairly quiet, about a 7 handle range in the S&P net, finishing up the day up about a little less than 4 handles, about not even 0.25%. The Dow up slightly more, as well as the NASDAQ from a percentage point basis. VIX cash also getting some of that weekend back, getting about 0.25 handle back, right about 987 right now. Still nicely in the single digits. If it could just give back that quarter and just freeze for the rest of the week, I'll be a happy camper, because then my crystal ball on Friday will look ever so precise. That'd be like 3 weeks in a row almost of bullseyes. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Got a whole week of vol yet to come, and as we all know, anything could happen in that scenario. Speaking of anything happening, Mr. Man About Town, a.k.a. the Tubinator. Sir, what's been happening in your neck of the woods? What have you been watching? What have you been trading? What have you been keeping an eye on in the world of options since last we spoke?
Well, I'm enjoying right now the pre-action here before earnings with Netflix. Just watching. The stock's up like $4 after market without any earnings report just yet. So that's been kind of interesting. The other thing I could come out is called KNDI. That's it. It's a Chinese electronic car maker that had volume somewhere like the 4 or 5 times. But it's like the 5th or 6th time in the last week or so I've noticed this particular name pop up.
Oh, what was the ticker again?
What's that?
What was the ticker again?
KNDI.
KNDI. Okay.
And 4 or 5 times.
Don't they make headphones? KNDI. Is that's like ear candy or something like that? I think they make headphones.
No, it's an automotive manufacturing company in China.
Well, there you have it.
Of electronic vehicles.
So there, I don't know. I had always. That's interesting.
So
that's very interesting.
Stock's up like it's almost doubled in the last couple of months, and you wonder if you've got your new cheap Tesla play involved here.
Well, like we said last week, anything involved in AI right now is to the moon.
Yeah,
if it's, and this must just be another one of those popular names where, it's super trendy. AI and Bitcoin. That if you build a portfolio, you should be 50% names that do AI, 50% Bitcoin. You'll be a billionaire in 5 years.
or you just make a Bitcoin algo that runs on AI, and then you've combined both worlds, and you are a trillionaire in less than a week. Looks like the Tubinator hit it on the head. Candy Technologies, Inc. is focused on the development of pure electric vehicle products and manufacturing electric vehicle parts. Their business operations are the design, development, manufacturing, and commercialization of electric vehicles, which are distributed in China and global markets. So Mr. Tubinator, find an interesting one. Closing today, $8.33, up about 1% on the day. But again, that's not a heck of a lot of move. Actually traded as low as $7.80. So I had a bit of a range, about a 50-cent range here today on the name. This also does about decent volume certainly for an odd block hand today, about 1,300 contracts. We look at a lot of names that do 200 or 300 contracts. Today doing decent paper, about 4,500. So maybe Mr. Tubinator is on to something here. We'll have to sink our teeth into this one. You guys check it out as well. KNDI, let us know what you think. Meanwhile, let's move on since we got the Meatball joining in. Mr. Meatball, what is catching your eye? Or what should say, what was catching your eye in today's activity, sir?
Another exciting one. Just craziness abounds. The VIX briefly threatened to break back above 10, and then did not. Kind of a slow one. Not a lot of volume. Apple was a big mover today. I saw that. So we're starting to see some of these big names move ahead of their earnings. So a lot of those names, and then the banks were up big because of our girl Yellen and probably raising rates in December. That was kind of the thought process. So we saw a lot of movement higher in the banks. J.P. Morgan, which on Thursday, people have said, "Well, their earnings stunk. I'm going to sell it off," even though their earnings were good. And then today, everybody's buying it up big. So a strong move in the banking sector. We've got a few more of them coming up in earnings this week. That'll be worth keeping track of.
Speaking of keeping track of, we got Netflix coming out in a little bit. We'll get to that in a second, as Tubinator just alluded to. But first, let's check in on the mobile all-star here, Mr. Uncle Mike Mr. Uncle Mike, what's cooking in your neck of the woods today, sir?
Well, a couple things just to add to what Mark said. Definitely the banks, when Yellen talks, the market does seem to kind of listen. I mean, we had a tiny bit of movement in the S&P today, so I think a lot of it could have been done with her remarks or with what's going on there, the banks going higher as they did. So I would say that's probably some of the bigger news. My beloved Apple did come up a little bit. It's almost like Mark took my show notes for the day talking about macro stuff and Apple. The only couple of other things that I would have to add about that would be we did have a little bit of movement to the upside in oil. I believe there was an explosion in Louisiana that may have had something to do with that late last night. Combine that, metals are pulling back slightly, but nothing too great of note. And then besides that, I think this is just a very calm market, which would make sense with the VIX being as low as it is. And I'll be honest with you, sometimes in a football game, we'll say to the players after they score 14 points and they're up 14-0, you got to say to them, 14 points is not going to win this football game. And I got to say 25.50 is not where I think this S&P is going to end in 2017. So needless to say, I am not short the the year-end December 2017 25.50 straddle by any means. I think I think something's going to happen, and that's my bold prediction for today's trading block.
Uncle Mike taking it out on the ledge there, on the precipice of risk, saying something will happen before the end of the year. Well done, sir. Taking a huge swing at the fences with that one. Speaking of swinging for the fences, they were certainly pricing in a swing, or at least a move towards the fences in one direction or the other out there in good old Netflix, aka the Widowmaker out there today. They're pricing in over $15, about $15.30, so about 7.5% or so. So they were, as they are wont to do, Netflix has a tendency to rock and roll, and they were pricing in some rocking and rolling out there today. And so far, at least here in the after hours, we're seeing some movement, but not quite perhaps the rocking and rolling, certainly what they had priced in. We're seeing about a three-handle move, so about 2% in the after hours, where they were pricing in about 7.5%. Again, this is first blush, so we got some time, but at least so far here, it doesn't seem like that one is popping off here. It looks like it got to as high as about a 208 half, trading about 206 half right now. It's maybe coming off a little bit off those recent highs. Let's just get a refresh. Yeah, it's pretty much giving up some of the ghost here, which is interesting stuff. And throughout the day, we saw a decent amount of paper. Its name does about 110,000 contracts a day, doing about 3x that, doing about 340,000 contracts. Pretty evenly split between calls and puts, about 1.3 to 1 calls over puts. So no real heavy bias one way or another. We'll have to pull out the skew, obviously, to know for certain, but still, interesting name. I know a lot of you guys out there like to play in this one. In fact, we have a earnings poll come up a little bit later, which doesn't have Netflix in it because Netflix is already popping off, so it'd be kind of silly to ask a question about it now for the rest of the week. But we got some other names in there that you guys like to trade. You've heard of them, so we'll get to that in a little bit. But first, Mr. Meatball, I know your crazies out there in the pit chat, they like to trade some of these active ones. What was catching their eye out there in Netflix today? Were they trading it up, getting ready for the earnings, or are they more kind of waiting and seeing?
Most people were kind of on wait and see, but we did have a few guys trading calendar spreads because, you're right, that straddle seemed really, really expensive on a relative basis to where it's been historically. And that was kind of the one thing we saw. There were some people that said, we don't love earnings spreads, but if there is one that maybe looks like a little edgerific, it might be the Netflix one. So we saw some calendar traders.
And Tubinator, you said from your pool house today that you were keeping an eye on Netflix too. You doing anything out there, and what's catching your eye out there in Netflix? And it's so far maybe underwhelming earnings move here.
Yeah, we saw it initially popped around, as you said, 208.5, 209. Obviously, the conference call makes or breaks this. Looks like they had some real solid growth outside of the U.S. That seems to be the real big number. So we'll have to see what they're looking for there. That's going to continue to grow. But, I played a little bit in this one just with a real cheap butterfly to get in, just to have some upside exposure just in case it wanted to pop. So we'll see how that works out for us.
You crazy flyer you. Like we said, yeah, Netflix usually a bit of a crazy flyer. This time, perhaps underwhelming. Who knows? Perhaps signaling what we can expect this cycle, or you never know. It's hard to tell. Used to be Alcoa was the big kickoff. Now Netflix moving things up a little bit. They're trying to be the big kickoff for earnings season. Hopefully this is not going to, hopefully we'll see a little more movement. Hopefully this won't be the bellwether of things to come. Otherwise it's going to be a very quiet and a very boring season. Of course, all you out there like to sell some premium in earnings. Maybe that's not exactly the worst thing in the world, sir. Other than that, there are some big names coming out this week. IBM tomorrow, Alcoa, the usual kickoff for earnings season. Wait until Wednesday this year. We got PayPal and E-Trade on Thursday, P&G and some others on Friday. So things are kicking off again. If you've been saying, kind of, if you're one of these guys like used to come on the floor once every quarter to trade earnings and that was it. If you're one of those guys at home who only likes to trade earnings, then here you go. Now's your time. You're happy and you're tuning in and looking for some stuff to rock and roll. We're not, on this show, I'd say we're not all here really huge fans of slinging things to earnings, as we said many times before, because it is very much a binary event. A lot of that is out of your control, out of your hands. You know, you kind of ride that barrel over the falls, and whatever happens, happens. So it's not perhaps the best thing from a risk management perspective, but some of you like to play a little close to the fire, in which case, earnings season, hopefully we'll have you covered. We'll got more coming up from that in a little bit. But now let's keep on rolling into our summary of the weird, the wild, the wonderful. Yes, it's time for the Odd Block.
It's time to break down the most interesting, unusual, and downright questionable options activity that's been identified by theoptionsinsider.com. It's time for the Odd Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Odd Block, where we break down the other side of the options market, some of the weirder stuff, perhaps, that didn't come across your radar, but it comes across ours. You can always read more over there at theoptionsinsider.com, or follow us on the Twitters and the Facebooks and whatnot. We put a lot of that links out throughout the day as well. So you don't have to wait only twice a week for showtime, but we do like to do it here as well. And we kick things off. We also put out our little Tesla tracker, which a lot of you guys like, and we break down things like this, including what the heck's been going on still in these crazy Jan 2019 50 catastrophe puts. Are there more lighting it up? Yes, there are. The tune of 108 more going up today. I just said last week how it just broke through the 30,000 open interest mark. Well, guess what? Just broke through 31,077. So for all of you out there who said it was some crazy structured product trade that all this OI came from, or some crazy ratio, or all the legion of theories we've had flung at us over the last few months as we've been watching these, the paper doesn't seem to line up with any of that. It's just couple hundred coming in a day or so, just piling in more. And maybe we're starting to add to it now because we look at it, we shine some light on things, and you disturb the cockroaches floating in. They're in, but still. Interesting stuff here as they continue to put up 100-odd contracts, or a couple of 200-300 contracts a day in these no-name options that continue to be the number one open interest position in one of the biggest names that everyone likes to talk about and trade out there, which is still kind of crazy town for all those out there who don't know what to make of it, us included. All right, let's move on to good old. You got more theories? Hit us up. We do like to hear your crazy theories. The more outlandish, the better. They put a smile on our face. All right, Comcast is where we're kicking off the real meat of stuff today. Good old Comcast Corp, ticker symbol CMCSA. A nice 5-letterer for all you out there playing the home game. This one closing today, $36.61, up about 60 cents on the day. So this name does about 28,000 contracts a day. Today doing a fair bit more than that, doing nearly 130,000 contracts, about $1.10 on the calls and only 19,000 on the puts. So that should tell you kind of where our interest, our eye of Sauron was drawn today here. All the calls, a lot of calls, pretty much lighting it up across the board out here in CMCSA. Say that 5 times fast. You know, at first blush, you thought, hey, it looks like a vertical, but as you start looking at these, it actually looks like they were going up, lifting offers on a lot of these, if not all of them. Some of them, if they weren't lifting offers, they were coming up pretty close to them. We saw starting off a 20,000 lot of the no 37 halves going up for 84 cents. Paper lifting the offer there. 20,000 lot of the no 40s also for 21 cents paper, also lifting offer there. Now, it could be a funky execution. It still could be a vertical. You never know if there's a weird, some 10 lot in the book that's obscuring these markets and making it look like it's on the offer. So bear that in mind as we're looking at this stuff. But still, interesting stuff. Should mention, by the way, about 31,000 open on the 37.5, so it could have been closing there. Only 12,000 open on the 40, so clearly opening. Maybe a bit of a roll, but it looks like they're both on the same side, so in which case it would just be piling in for more fun. Also piling in 20,000 of the Feb 42 halves, going up for 35 cents. That one a little bit more finessed in the execution. Wasn't just coming up and gobbling up offers or close to it. Also 20,000 lot of the Jan 40s going up, also lifting offers for 60 cents there over there on the Philly. Most of this going up on the Philly. That's where a lot of this kind of paper likes to go up. I should mention about the open interest on the Febs was 8,000 and change, so clearly opening there, and 87,000 on the Jans. So looks like could be closing or piling in there. A lot of funky stuff here to look in. We'll dissect it in a minute. First, let's look at how this thing has been performing over the past year. It's been an interesting year here for good old Comcast Corp, hitting its nadir right around $30 back in November of last year. Actually, go figure, right around Election Day. And then it's kind of never really looked back since then, hitting a high of about 42 back in August of this year. It's kind of come off that a bit since then, obviously off about 6 handles since then. So I guess it didn't like those levels, but maybe it's retracing. If this is indeed opening all upside paper, I should mention some of it went up with stock with buy rag component. It looks like there might have been a stock component to this as well. All sorts of funk. And since we have the Tubinator on, he used to put up funk for a living. Let's start with him. Mr. Tubinator, you got people lifting offers on calls pretty much across the board. We see that sometimes people just want to get deltas in a name, so they'll just kind of load up across the board, and they're kind of strike almost agnostic of where they put that kind of stuff, as long as they get the deltas they want. Does this have the whiff of that to you? I mean, I'm sure you put up a lot of that paper back in the day, or does this have the whiff of something else afoot to you?
Well, first of all, I got to give a shout out to my old friend Nemo. Because if you got to cross one of these, he'd probably come back to the desk going double ching as a broker. This came across to me, especially with my good friend Henry Schwartz and his option alert, as a 4-way package. Looks like it all went up at the exact same time. Maybe the stock price was just a bit out of whack that you might be able to get a theoretical on one end or the other that kind of show some edge. But it looks to me like maybe someone was rolling out of positions, but obviously the idea of rolling 03740 to a Jan 40 Feb 42 doesn't make sense based on the open interest. So I'm not exactly sure what they were doing here, but somebody rolled all 4 legs at the same time, and these were a broker's favorite order of all time as well.
Yeah, nice 80,000 contracts. That doesn't that pays for lunch at the very least. Not sure for the Tubby though, because his lunches were kind of extravagant, shall we say? Mr. Meatball, any thoughts on this? Is this your favorite kind of just getting long deltas type trade? Or do you think there's more afoot here, like the Tubinator?
Yeah, you know what? It looks like a roll, and a pretty clean roll, and somebody's just trying to get more duration in their trade. So that and giving up a little bit of upside to get that done. Comcast is an interesting name with all the cord cutting going on. At the same time, they also provide the cord. They provide the internet cord, so you can cut the cable cord. And so they're producing content. Everyone wants content. Content is king, and they own content. So it's kind of interesting to see kind of all the different pieces in play. My guess is that this is there's got to be some sort of stock involved here somewhere. Not sure, but definitely this is a long bias roll that was kind of put in place.
Yeah, content is king. We certainly like that here on the old Options Insider Radio Network. But you guys both talking about clean rolls. Well, we got you covered here in Alerian today. Alerian MLP, ticker symbol AMLP. Closing today, $11.11, pretty much unched on the day. This is the name that does about 5,200 contracts a day. Today, doing about 45,000 of it. The lion's share, about 38 or so, coming in this pretty clean, at least on the surface, it looks like, and sizable roll. We saw today the Jan 11 vertical, easy for me to say, the Jan 11 roll going up here for about 29 cents. Looks like paper blasting out the 11s 20,000 times in OC for 20 cents, and then picking up 18,434, so a little bit of a ratio there, of the Jan 11s for 49 cents, like we said, doing the whole thing for 29 cents. Worthy of note, size OI on these OC 11s to the tune of 84,000. So this is indeed our friend, and if he's responsible for the lion's share of that, then there could indeed be a lot more to come here if he is going to keep the rolling party alive. Right now, he didn't even roll the full 20,000, so perhaps that is not the case. I'll look in here, too. Like I said, the stock at 11.11, so these OC 11s are in the money. They're also getting close to coming up due, so it makes sense to maybe be rolling this bad boy. And if it looks like we don't see a stock leg with this, but if it looks like it is on the surface here, that it is a kind of a keeping the party alive trade, then that perhaps is worthy of note as well. Looking back at the year that has been here in AMLP, this is one that's come up on our radar a few times over the past year, and it's been an interesting year for a good old AMLP. They drifted as low as about 10.5 back just about 2 months ago, about the 18th of August. They were floating around those levels, and it got as high back beginning of this year around 13.25, 13.30 or so. So an interesting range, about a 3-handle range or so out here. And our friend here, keeping the 11-handle party alive, thinking perhaps better days are ahead. Looking at this chart, perhaps that's not the craziest bet because it is floating around its 52-week lows. But then again, you go a little bit farther back into the past, and that picture changes a wee bit. We see it get down to, in February of 2016, got down to about $8. So there is more downside to be had if this name does continue to feel the heat. Either way, our friend here, keeping the party alive. Let's go back, reverse order this time. Let's start with the meatball. You think this is our friend just a nice clean roll? I think you said for the other one, this seems like a pretty clean roll. And you think our friend's got more to do if that is indeed the case, sir?
Yes and yes. It is a clean roll, and he probably has more to do. These AMLPs, remember how hot they were a couple of years ago when everyone thought that, you could do no wrong owning oil, and oil was going to be perma above $70 a barrel, and it was never going to drop below that level? Well, guess what? AMLPs are not so hot anymore. And that's what we're seeing is, so yeah, absolutely clean and more to do. Just like a good old shave and a haircut, I have no idea what that means.
That's a little before even your time, sir. But the point is taken. Mr. Tubinator, same question for you, and also a related question to all this. Is all this size options prints going up? Does it make you feel a little homesick for the old days of putting up paper here, sir?
Yeah. I mean, there's a lot of big flow here today. Obviously, this is one that I think you're exactly right on this. This is somebody who probably took a shot, saw the stock still dropping another 3 to 5% over the last 2 months, but is thinking energy is going to continue to roll. So instead of just trying to open something new, just roll this thing out that way. I like it. There's a lot of big paper going on here today. I kind of wish I was down there.
I see the single tear. It's running down your face, sir, even as we only do the show here on audio. All right. Yeah, I know this is just it's like teasing you with a nice steak buffet, sir. All right. We'll wrap it up after this one so you don't have to put up with any more. Unless, of course, we do have some listener mail about similar stuff. So you may not be off the hook just yet. Let's wrap it up here. HIMX, HIMX, Himax Technologies, Inc. This is an ADR, listeners, in the fabless semi-solutions space. This is the name that does about 13,000 contracts a day, doing about 43,000 today. Pretty sizable, about 40,000 of that coming on the call side. So a lot of action in the calls. This is another interesting one that on first blush looks like a vertical. Then you start digging into it a little bit, it actually looks like perhaps it's a stupid. So Uncle Mike will be excited because he likes himself a good stupid. In this case, it was the Jan 7 10, again, looked like a vertical at first, and the execution makes us doubt that. Again, execution's not everything. Tubby can tell you that. You know, they print these things at all sorts of wild prices. Doesn't exactly mean what they did. But still, we saw the Jan 7, 710 vertical / stupid going up 21,500 times on the 7s for $3.40, right around the bid there. And then looks like also hitting the bid for the Jan 10s, doing it 10,000 times. So bit of a 2-by-1 with some extra ratio there. Doing those for 2 1/4. Open interest 27,000 on the 7s, 16,000 on the 10s. So it could be a bit of a giving up the ghost here as well. Someone, like we said before, wants to get those deltas. Got them. Maybe they're the stock closing today $9.14. So right in the middle of the two strikes. Maybe that wasn't enough for him. He wants to get the heck out of Dodge, or he could be short those and wanting to pile in which case shorten the 7s deeply in the money, 2 handles in the money. Interesting choice, also worthy of note. We did see some other scattered small paper on other strikes, probably the biggest being 1,000. A lot of the Nov 12s going up for 15 cents. Also looks like paper selling those, and about 800 of the Jan 12s for $1.70. Also looks like paper hitting at or near the bid for those as well. So a lot of scattered call dumping paper, for lack of a better term here, which is at least as how it appears here on the old surface. Worthy of note as well, there was a decent pop here in the old underlying thing. Averages about 6 million shares a day, doing about 9.3, 9.4 million today. So perhaps some of this going up tide. Let's look at the year that's been out here in good old HIMX. Has kind of been a turbulent, frothy road, hitting as low as about $5 back in February of this year, and then topping out at just a tick under $12 just about a little over a month ago. So this thing has kind of been all over the place. Like we said, now it's about $9, so $3 off those highs. So the fabulous semi-space, no shortage of volatility to be found out there. Mr. Meatball, take us home, sir. What do you feel on this one? I think this is as it appears to be, maybe just a size stupid, a size unwinding of a previous long stupid. What's got your spidey sense tingling here?
Yeah, I mean, this is something that 100% has stock involved. So, whether it is or isn't really doesn't matter. It's the fact that he's got something else against it. So this is a trade where if you just look at the trade on its own and then you think about the fact that he's got an underlying position, it's an entirely different trade. So that's my main interpretation of what I'm looking at. No matter how you kind of build this around, it's 100% a stock inclusive trade.
Someone putting on some underlying and looking to get yield and pretty much get all the yield, hitting every strike across the board. That could certainly be the case. The OI makes it look like maybe this guy's been up to this party before, or perhaps he is indeed maybe giving up the ghost. We'll let the final vote fall to the Tubinator. Mr. Tubinator, what's your thoughts here? What's your spidey sense tingling here in HIMX?
Yeah, I'm not so sure there's stock involved. There's a heck of a large position out in this across the board in this one. So what are we looking at here, Jen? What did I lose here? I just had them up. There we are. Yeah, I mean, so the 7s and 10s both could look like closing, and the 12s still have 28,000 open interest on them. Once again, our good friends who I follow a lot of this technical flow are pretty good about picking up whether a stock print went up with this. There's little question in my mind that 7 and 10s both went up at the same time. That's pretty close within a second of those prints. So that appears that could be just even an exchange missing, a quick hold. But these are definitely closing positions and probably based on an up move that they've seen in the market, and probably took off maybe half of the position. Kept the long 12 if that's the case. But I haven't really done the research all the way back on this. I do have this on my list to talk about at another time, but I'm guessing this is someone just taking off calls.
Interesting stuff. A vote for closing things out. Before you wrap up the odd block, really quickly, Mr. Tubinator, I know on the last show you were talking, I believe it was about XSPX or SPX, and how you used to put up some paper out there. Anything you want to share with us on that one, sir?
Well, yeah, we were talking about XSP.
That was it, XSP, yes, thank you.
Right, we don't see a lot of volume in that, or we don't see a lot of liquidity in the market. And unfortunately, it isn't really used a lot by the traders in the pit. But that's where the options pits come into play. And Mark has hit on this. I've hit on this several times, why it's so important to have brokers you can use in a VIX pit and an SPX pit, longer dated things that look too wide to play. It's really not the case. XSP is going to trade very similarly, almost identically to SPX if you quote it through a broker. If you want to trade electronically, you're on your own. Have fun. But XSP is a tool a lot of SMAs can use if they have, if you've got somebody with, $1 million in their account, that's fine. We can allocate an SPX strategy to them. But if you've got someone in there with $25,000 or $50,000, it's hard to give him 7/10 of an SPX option. But we can give him 7 XSP options or whatever that breakdown can be. So that's something we've tried to educate when I was on the floor, some of our IAs, to use that so they can actually utilize the money they have in their portfolios and not leave some of that just on the sidelines and not trading.
There you go, sir. Yeah, we don't really, this name doesn't really come up on our radar. We talked about it last time. The use cases for it are kind of niche. I'm glad to hear you're outlining an additional use case out there, because there are more people out there who probably could benefit from that tax treatment, but also looking a little bit more nuance in how they structure their trades rather than the big kind of take it or leave it SPX type contract. Speaking of you guys and what you like, what your needs are, we're going to address those needs right now, because it's Monday. It's time to open up the mail block.
It's time to take your seat on the All-Star panel as we read your emails, tweets, Facebook messages, website comments, and much more. It's time for the mail block.
All right, just checking in here on the old flicks while we're in between segments here. Netflix still not looking that great. It's up about 1.8% right now, up about a little more than 3 handles, so nowhere near the levels it was putting up, about 206.30 or so, nowhere near even how high it spiked earlier. We'll see. Again, anything could change by tomorrow's open, but not looking like it's the barnstormer like some people had expected. Speaking of earnings, we asked you guys last week. Let's pay off that first before we get into this week's question. We asked you, hey, earnings season almost upon us. What's your favorite way to trade earnings using options? We like to give you guys an easy one every now and then. We gave you some 4 choices: selling the straddles or flies or condors, buying said straddles, flies, or condors, selling the old puts or put spreads, buying the old calls or call spreads, and those are your 4 choices. There we go. And let's see. How did your guys vote? There we go. 40% coming in on the premium. Actually, since we talked about it on the show last week, it actually increased by 2%. It was 38%, I think, on the show last week. I thought for sure the premium sellers would come in and crush that down a little bit. Nope, it actually increased. So premium buyers out in force last week. 40% buying themselves some calls or call spreads. Not buying the more premium mitigated ones, though, like the flies or, of course, straddles in there, too. So I can see maybe why you avoided that one. 25% saying selling the old puts or put spreads. I thought that would do better, quite frankly. 22% saying you're selling straddles or flies or condors, and only 13% says you're buying the straddles, the flies, or the condors. So you don't like the buying premium with wings, but you like buying calls and verticals. Interesting stuff. I did not expect that result, quite frankly. So always fun to see a little bit of difference. Like we said, Pierre HK saying likes to buy ADM straddles with the average trading range or average true range about greater than 2. So that's his methodology. Trader Ray saying he likes the collars or protective puts. Anything else held over earnings is a gamble, not a trade. We're with you there. This week we asked you, hey, since it's earnings season, you guys got earnings on the brain. We thought we'd ask you, give you some names. Which ones are you guys feeling like trading? We said, which name do you plan to trade most actively this cycle? And if you don't see your favorite here, hit us up. We'll put it on a separate list. All right, we gave you 4 choices right now: Tesla, Amazon, Apple, and the old Googs, aka Alphabet. What are you guys feeling right now? Let's see. Before I reveal what you guys are thinking so far, let's go to Uncle Mike. Uncle Mike, what is your call amongst these? I have a feeling I know which way you're leaning. And then what do you think is winning our poll, sir?
Well, I got to go with Apple just because of the many years in which I had spoken of Apple on the show with all those collars and back spreads, oh my, with which I did all that time. And for our listeners, I think I'm going to go with Tesla. I think that all that talk of those life insurance puts that we keep talking about on the show. I think that resonates with our listeners, and I think it excites them about Tesla.
Interesting. A lot of excitement out there for all of these names, quite frankly. Mr. Tubinator, same question for you, sir. What's floating your boat, and what do you think is floating our audience's boat?
Well, I will never trade Tesla again after this week.
You got a little burn, did you?
You know, when you try to play some Condors and you watch the stock go down 13, up 14, up 6, down 7, but all inside the range of your long Condors up both sides, gets a little annoying. So I'm out of that game.
That's the magic of gamma scalping, Mr. Tubinator. That's where that comes in.
I know. I think just the people are going to say Apple. I think it's interesting to watch this one come up its lows the way it did. You're within 4.5 hours of its all-time high with a week and a half to go into earnings. I think that's going to be an exciting one. I personally would probably be trading Amazon. I think that probably, watching what that's done in the last 2 weeks, I think the worst of that fear is probably over, and that's probably got the best upside here. Interesting
votes, Mr. Meatball. How are you falling, sir? And where do you think our audience is falling?
I'm going to say, on a personal level, I'm going to say Apple. It's the only one that is, it's so big, it's almost like trading like an index because there's so much value there. It kind of stopped being its own company and more than it's just like this huge thing. It's like waiting on a non-farm payroll more than an actual earnings. And then I'm going to guess everybody picked Tesla because, if any company where the CEO is allowed to lie through his teeth and the stock still goes up is a company where the retail public's going to want to trade it.
Tell us how you really feel, sir. Yeah, you're right so far. 38% loving themselves some Tesla. Only 31% like an Amazon. I thought Amazon would be vying for the top, and it is. Apple, only 23%, so maybe falling off its former heyday when all anyone could talk about was all Apple all the time. Only 8% for the old Alphabets, a.k.a. the Googs. Maybe because we called it Alphabet and not Google. People still don't seem to be able to reconcile those two in their heads. It just went live like an hour before showtime. So you got all week. If you haven't voted, head on over at Options. Let us know what you think. You guys are already hitting us up with your alternatives. Trade with Bulls LLC says he wants Intel on the list. INTC, I can get behind my old pal Intel. It was a fun one while the run lasted there. Out there today, closing today, 39.76 out there in Intel land. It was interesting to watch how this name has evolved, like many others, in the wake of the post.com boom and then rebuilding and everything else, seeing names like IBM and others shifting their business models a little bit and how all that is playing. I know back in the day, the paper out here was all markedly one-sided, funds dumping calls and buying puts pretty much all day long, which made it about as fun to trade as it sounds, but there were some moments of fun out there. So Intel on the list. How's it? Let's see. It's at 39.76. It's doing about 66,000 contracts a day, which isn't bad actually compared to what it used to do. So those aren't bad numbers. About 53,000 today, so a little bit light. About 4-to-1 calls over puts today. Open interest wise, it's about 1.3-to-1 calls over puts. So it seems like fairly in line. A little bit more paper going up maybe today than it was a few years back. All right, let's see what else we got here. Here's one for you, Mr. Tubinator. It may appeal to you here. This came in from McGill, Montreal. He says, I have a question for you guys regarding ticker symbol GIL, G-I-L. That is Gildan Activewear Inc. He says, there were two large 3,000 prints of the 30 strike puts on October 9th with earnings on the 12th. Can you guys explain any rationale around that? Well, let's do a little live digging here. As we did, Mr. Tubinator mentioned our old friends over there with the Flowmaster and his service Trader. One of the nice things they do is you can put in the date and then put in a ticker, and it'll tell you what was trading that day. So we can do just that. And if you see that, you'll see that quite a few of these No 30 puts traded on the 9th, including maybe what he's referring to, a big block of 6,839 for a buck and change going up that day, well above the offer. Open interest only about 1,900 contracts, so clearly opening, someone putting in, I think it might have been a late print, But either way, it was well above the offer. Today, Gill not so active, only about 134 contracts going up, 200 some odd a day. So clearly this was a pretty active day. Let's go look here. And actually, I'm pulling up right now. These no 30 puts up here to still be open with about 10,000 and change on the old dial. One of the nice things about one of the other platforms we like to use as well is good old live vol, and they will show you graphically, which is nice, when a lot of this OI was actually open. You could see, but they came in with a couple of thousand actually back on the 1,500 actually back on the 28th, trading when the stock was trading 31.13, and then like I mentioned, that big chunk coming in on the 9th. A total of 9,000 went up that day, 9,150. So someone had clearly an axe to grind, but the OI is pretty much unched ever since then. So I said about 10,000 of these open over the last month or so. He mentioned having earnings on the second, but it looks like our friend here wasn't too concerned about earnings because he didn't close or adjust or do anything with this. It wasn't an earnings trade. It was more of a longer term, probably hedge against a pretty sizable underlying position. If I had to guess here, could be outright spec, but you don't usually see that with that kind of size and these kind of names. And again, the strike selection kind of a bit of a soft. It's only about every 5 handles or so out there, so he has to pretty much pick these at the money strikes. Let's look back here at the last few months, last year of Gill. This is not a name we talk about very actively here on the show. This thing got as low as about 23.5 back in February of this year. That seemed to be the nadir for the last year or so. And it's kind of bounced off 32 a few times on the old upside. So it is reasonable to assume that someone could be getting worried about this thing getting a little top heavy. And if they happen to put it on right before earnings in case there was some massive downside, then I could certainly see that. I don't think, given the fact that nothing's been closed here, I don't think there's anything nefarious going on, nor was there any crazy downside move in the stock just in the past month or so. It's kind of been flirting around these levels. Mr. Tubinator, you like looking at a lot of this kind of paper. Anything catching your eye here, or are you feeling this is kind of just like looks like a straight up stock hedge?
You know, the earnings are actually November 2nd. Not the 12th.
Oh, I thought you said October. I misread that. You're right. He says November 2nd. Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
so that adds an interesting wrinkle to it.
If you look at the graph on this stock, I mean, it hasn't really done much over, since June. Let's say since June. So that's about 4 or 5 months. The stock's really had a $2 range. But in the year before that, it went up 25%. So it's very possible, once again, we're looking at one of those situations where someone's got a long position and just wants to protect it. You know, we've seen a stock that can't really make new highs. It keeps trying to bounce off 32 and it can't break through. So if I'm long this stock, I'd love to see it break through, but I don't mind a 75-cent flyer to see if this thing, if it's going to break down. I want to protect some of that asset. That's what I'm looking at.
Yeah, you're right. I misread that. He says November 2nd, which does change the character quite a bit. It is clearly an earnings hedge at this point. There's no weeklies to trade out here in Gill, so you got to trade monthlies. And so obviously October 30th ain't going to do it if your earnings are on the 2nd, October 20th. So you got to go out to know. So it looks like there's more of a straight up earnings hedge. This thing has had a bit of an upside run of late. Doesn't seem too dubious that our friend here would want some sort of these kind of names. I don't know, Mr. Meatball, anything to add there, or are you on board with that?
Yeah, I mean, it's 100%. I mean, so are the puts in October, or are the puts a November contract? I'm sorry, I was a little confused by that.
They are November.
It's 100% an earnings hedge, right? It's
Yes.
got to be. I mean, it's somebody that owns stock, and they're worried about earnings sucking, and so they buy puts. And, that's got, I mean, there's no other explanation other than that. Now, if they come out and warn tomorrow and the stock's down 30% or 50%, well, then maybe my opinion changes. But I think this is likely just somebody setting up a hedge, probably done around the time that the stock was at a recent high. So they were trying to maximize or minimize the cost of the hedge.
Agreed, sir. Yes, that November 2nd date changes things. Let's look up, since we're talking Gill, let's stick in a similarly named fashion here with Gild, G-I-L-D. This is our old friend Gilead Sciences, Inc. Closing today about $80 or so. And who do we have writing in here? We have Ascenta wants to know what can happen to the current options being held of Kite which is being acquired by Guild and then being delisted. So I saw this one coming in. And of course, whenever you have these kinds of questions, listeners, the best place to go and the easiest thing that you can do really is just type your ticker symbol and then, OCC or Options Clearing Corp into it, because they would typically have a circular that explains exactly that. They're kind of the keepers of all things corporate actions, how the stocks are going to be split, how it's going to be, changed up. Obviously, it depends on the deal. Is it an all-cash deal? Is it a straight-up takeover? Is it a merger? Is it a 1.8-to-1 shares? These things all break down in different ways, and they will crunch the numbers for you. In this case, it looks like it was an all-cash deal for $180 per share for Kite. So that means your Kite shares, guess what? Not worth $180. So all your options are going to be settled out there. So if you got like, $1.50 call, it's going to be worth a nice $30 times the multiplier. So $3,000 for every one lot you got there. Now, of course, you guys can probably see if you listen to options or listen to the show or trading options for a while. The downside of that is all your time value is gone. So if you got some, Jan 2020 call out there, it's all gone. Out of the money options are now worthless. In the money options are pretty much straight settled to that 180 price. So the moral of the story is you probably don't want to go through one of these if you can. If you get a nice bump, you can close it out. That's good. But if you ride through these things all your time, it's effectively like the options just being settled out right that day. So all the extra time value you may have had past that date, which I think was a couple of weeks ago in this case, all gone. So bear that in mind if you're trading these bad boys. I don't know. Uncle Mike, you have any ever client go through any of these types of like corporate actions? Any fun stories on that front?
No fun stories, and the reason I don't have any fun stories is because every time I've run into something like this, I always do the call the OCC or the 888 options, whatever the case may be, or however you want to reach them, and that typically takes care of something like that. Just one thing that I would just say is that these mergers, acquisitions, splits, and spinoffs and things like that, they're like snowflakes. No two seem to be alike. So make sure you have an understanding of what's going on with all of them and what you're actually getting when something like this happens.
Well said, sir. I knew you were too savvy to fall for that trap. I thought I would tee it up for you nonetheless. All right, let's keep on rolling into our final segment. Great questions. Keep them coming. We got many more. We'll try to squeeze more in future shows. Meanwhile, let's keep on rolling right on into Around the Block.
It's time to tell you what we'll be watching on our trading screens until the next episode. It's time for Around the Block.
All right, everybody, welcome to Around the Block. This is, of course, the portion of the show where we peer into the future, tell you what we're watching for the rest of this week. Quick check-in on our friend, the old Widowmaker. Up a little bit more now, up about four handles or about 2%. Easy for me to say. Right now, so a little bit more, but still roughly close to where it was about half an hour ago. The last time we checked. Also worth noting, if you're playing the earnings game like you like financials, Goldman Sachs coming out tomorrow before the bell. So hopefully, if you're trading that one, you got your positions on already. This one closed at 242.40 or so. This thing's doing about 36,000 contracts a day. Did a little more than that. Did about 40,000 yesterday, or should I say today, about 1.5 to 1. Calls over puts. They're pricing in about $6 straddle, so about 2.5% out there. Of course, I think rallied 1.6% today, right? So maybe some of that move has already played out, but we shall see tomorrow. So we got Netflix in the can. We got Goldman coming out tomorrow. Earnings season is officially upon us. That said, we'll start with you, Mr. Tubinator. What are you watching for the rest of this week, sir? At least until the next time we can all gather together here on Thursday.
I am watching what I talked about last week, micro. Everything's going to be about these earnings. From our option alert, we saw something at the end of the day, a big IWM Condor opened. That's going to expire October 27th, which is looking for about a 2.5 to 3.2% down move in our mini Russells here to the end of October. I think someone's thinking kind of the same way I am. They're thinking a powerful earnings season, and maybe someone taking some of those 10% profits out of small caps to use that to get into some of these earnings, get long some of these stocks. That's seeing coming up here the next week or so.
Interesting. Take that, Uncle Mike, because you've been talking all macro, and Tubby throws micro in your face. What do you say to that, sir?
Well, I have nothing to say to that. I think that shows the power of the option block, because while one of us is watching micro, the other one, such as myself, is watching macro. I'm watching the news of the world. I want to see what's happening. I'm watching a certain chief executive's Twitter account, watching to see if we have nuclear war, watching to see all sorts of fun things that are going on in the world. We are the dream team at the option block, and that is how it goes.
There you go. One's got macro, one's got micro. Who knows what the heck the Meatball's got? Let's check in now. Mr. Meatball, what are you watching for the rest of this week, sir?
I mean, we've got a ton of earnings. We've got a VIX that's 9.6, S&P right near an all-time high, Bitcoin at $5,500 per coin. I mean, there's all sorts of stuff to be watching. I'll tell you, I think that we're going to hear something around who the Fed nominee is in the next 4 to 5 days, and that is going to drive markets one way or the other. And my guess is it's not going to be somebody as dovish, which could be a little more, which could really make things interesting. That's kind of the next thing I think that could push things. And then I believe our president is heading to China in the next couple of weeks. Yeah. That is going to be an extremely important trip. That is going to be a market driver. If he comes out of there and things go right, Mike and his straddle could be the straddle that that Mike is selling me, that 2550 straddle that Mike agreed to sell me at the top of the show. Thank you very much.
There you go.
Paying off. And alternatively, if it goes disastrous, that could also pay off. So I think that that is going to be the major piece of news along with earnings season. I think if earnings season starts off good, which it appears to be doing so far, that could be a pretty good bonus. And like I said, and then watch those AI names. I don't know. So my question is there a way for me to buy stocks involved with artificial intelligence using Bitcoin rather than the other way around? I don't want to own Bitcoin, but what I want to do is use Bitcoin to buy artificial intelligence. Maybe that would work as opposed to the other way around. I don't know.
You still got to hold Bitcoin somewhere in that chain, so you're opening yourself up to all the fun that is associated with that. Speaking of Bitcoin, I was walking through a mall the other day and I saw a Bitcoin ATM. And it kind of just made me chuckle. I was like, what am I going to do? Put in my card and take out one for $5,000? It seems like a interesting use case for an ATM. I'm sure they do fractional or something like that. But still, it kind of brought a chuckle to my face. Unfortunately, that music means we're pretty much done, listeners. That's all we got cooking here for today's show. But don't worry, we'll be back on Thursday. And we'll see if we can smatter in some fun interviews from the big FIA show going down this week here in Chicago as well on the old network. Maybe some boot camps coming up. We got those coming up tomorrow too. Maybe we'll see if we can get those live for you as well. But before we go, one last time around the horn, let's start with ye old Uncle Mike, who I believe agreed to sell Sebastian that straddle for, I think it was a nickel, the old gentleman's bet. So good luck on that one. What do you got cooking in your neck of the woods, sir?
Not selling a 2550 straddle for a nickel, that is for sure. But anyway, if someone is interested in a financial advisor who is not afraid of the word straddle for a nickel, contact me at 312-212-3531 or shoot me an email at mtosaw@rcmfs.com. There'll be more on the SKU fund a little bit next week, but for now, that is all I have to say.
I got your marketing for that. Have your fun with the SKU fund. There you go. See, it writes itself, sir. It's just
loving it.
Genius or madness, depending upon your perspective. Speaking of perhaps madness, Mr. Meatball, what is cooking in your neck of the woods, sir?
Hey, Mark, do you know where else there's a Bitcoin ATM?
I'm scared to ask.
Matt knows this.
In the SIBO?
No, across the street in the former Alcoa's bar in O'Neill's Well House.
What are you going to spend $5,000 on in that place?
Well, apparently Bitcoin.
You're going to take out $5,000 worth of Bitcoin. Nobody going to do it in that place.
Well, no, you could, but you can deposit too. You can buy Bitcoin through those ATMs. So
$5,000 will.
When you're drunk, you go out and buy Bitcoin.
$5,000 will take you a long way in the former Alcoa's land. Aside from slinging Bitcoin ATMs, what do you got cooking, sir?
we've got we're going to have an Easy VIX course coming up shortly, and you should be seeing details from that. I'm going to be at the Las Vegas Traders Expo November 2nd through the 4th. That's also when my next book comes out. My book is going to be released, it looks like, in the next couple of weeks. It's called Trading Options for Edge. So be on the lookout for that.
All right, Mr. Tubinator, you said you hinted before some big things coming in your Man About Town gig. Anything to update us on, sir?
Not quite yet. I'm going to enjoy this week, hopefully just this week, and our what we call our Indian summer here in Chicago from the Pool House. And probably another week we'll have something, but maybe this is my last Man About Town week. Let's see.
Uh-oh, I don't know what I can do without how I can handle a non-retired Tubinator. We'll have to see how that'll go. And I feel bad. We're supposed to be joined by our friend over Ophir at Capital Markets Labs today. He was struck down violently ill moments before showtime, so hopefully he's feeling better. But in the meantime, I'll give him his plug as well. He's doing a big scientific options back-testing webinar. So if you hear a lot talking about a lot about back-testing on the old show these days, if you have a strategy you want to back-test, he's got the setup for you. He's going to do a free webinar to show you how to do just that. It's going to be on the 18th, which is Wednesday, I believe, at 4 p.m. So we'll check that out. We'll put the link out. We'll put it out on Twitter. We'll put it in the show notes so you guys can subscribe to that. If you're interested, it's free. Check it out. So if people are always asking us how to backtest and do these strategies, it's a challenging thing. Ophir's got a system a lot of you seem to like. So if you haven't checked it out yet, kick the tires and light the fires. As they say, watch us on social media. Add options for that link, or grab the show and you can check it out for yourself. And on behalf of the Tubinator and the Meatball, and indeed myself, and of course Uncle Mike, I want to thank all of you out there in the listening audience for downloading, streaming, and subscribing, and all the other fun stuff that you do. And we'll see you on Thursday for more of the Option Block.
The preceding program was a production of the Options Insider Radio Network. For more quality options programs, visit www.theoptionsinsider.com or search for Options Insider Radio Network in your podcast provider of choice. Listeners can also access all of our programming through our mobile app, available in iTunes and on Google Play. Don't forget to follow along with your favorite programs and submit your own questions for the hosts at twitter.com/options, facebook.com/theoptionsinsider, or via questions at theoptionsinsider.com.